On behalf of Crosscheck Media and Biz Talk Today TV, welcome everyone to Power Hour. I am your host, Todd Schoenberger. James Breslo is away today. He will be returning next week, just in time for Election Day. But joining me now is Ryan Clancy. He is the chief strategist at No Labels, which is a centrist political advocacy group that supports bipartisanship. So, Ryan, you have been very vocal and public about this government shutdown. We're in day 29 right now,
Yeah.
and you have been saying this is more than just about budget dysfunction. This really poses a stress test to America's operational backbone. With the military, you have 1.3 million active duty military that are essentially working for free right now. They're showing up to work, they're protecting the homeland, but they may not be getting paid this Friday. What kind of hidden risks are there to national security that are keeping you up at night?
So, we talked about this. No Label's been around for 15 years, and every time there's a shutdown, we're against it. It is always and everywhere stupid and pointless, and it just destroys people's faith in government. But as you noted at the top, it is about a lot more than that. This is significantly impacting our military, and it's really across two areas. So one is jeopardizing the pay of military service members and their families, and we can talk in more detail about how that is something a lot of them cannot afford, given their financial situation. And number two is our military readiness. So when you think about training, testing, bidding out contracts for ships and weapon systems, all of that is halted right now.
Right. You're absolutely right about that. And so I used to work at USAA, which caters to the military. And you're right. Military folks are not paid a great deal of money. You take the private first class soldier, they're paid very little. And then a lot of these soldiers they have families that they need to support back home, especially if they are deployed. So you have to wonder, where's that gap? How is it going to be filled? What is your thought, though? What's the political calculus here? I mean, you guys are really at No Labels, are really focused on the center, but this seems like we're not hearing a lot about it, though, in the press, at least until now.
Well, there's two layers to this fight. So the headline is this is about healthcare and the expansion of those or extension of those expanded Affordable Care Act tax credits that were passed during COVID. And what Democrats are saying, in effect, is we want a full extension of those. When that happens, we'll shut down the government. The Republican position is we'll talk about that, but not until we reopen the government. But underneath that is something much more fundamental, and it is the desire of each base for a fight. That is what's really going on here, which is to say the Democratic base feels like it's been getting steamrolled for much of this year. They feel like they're not getting much done in Congress. Trump is doing all these executive actions. And they flipped out at Chuck Schumer in the spring, the Democratic Senate Majority Leader, when he did a deal at the time to prevent a shutdown then. They saw that as a betrayal. So when we got to the fall, this is where they want to take a stand. They want to prove they're willing to fight Trump. But it is something that has no off-ramp at the moment, and that's the concern. This gets worse as it goes on.
That is true. And the original argument that Americans were hearing the past few weeks, was about the Obamacare subsidies going away. These need to be negotiated, or they need to be included in the new CR, the continuing resolution. Right. But now you're hearing about SNAP benefits. There seems to be this sense of urgency that by Saturday, I believe and you know this better than I do, I believe it's 34 million Americans that are receiving SNAP benefits that will not be able to access these benefits beginning on Saturday. So you have this urgency, you got two parts here, two prongs, but it doesn't seem to be moving the needle right now. Here you have the lead story taking place with the president in Asia, working on all kinds of business deals, which are great for the country. But then you have the Democrats. You wonder, where's their leadership right now? I mean, what's your assessment? I mean, do you think they will come to a conclusion before this weekend SNAP benefits expire?
So you noted how that these consequences, they grow over time and they get worse. So a couple of days shutdown doesn't really matter. Now, as you noted, you're talking about SNAP benefits. You're going to see an impact on public hospitals. Now, it's a little bit more of a sliding scale at the state level. It's not like this weekend 34 million benefits just get cut off. States have some ways to tide themselves over, but there is no question those are going to be jeopardized for a lot of people. And there really is no reason for it. I mean, what I would say, and this goes back to No Labels has a real credibility here. Back in 2013, the Freedom Caucus shut down the government because they were said to President Obama, we want you to defund Obamacare. Now, I want you to forget for a moment what you think of Obamacare, whether you think it's good, bad, or indifferent. Thinking you are going to force the president to defund his signature domestic achievement that he just signed a couple months ago is the dumbest political tactic I'd ever seen in my life. And guess what? It failed. It didn't do anything. If the Democrats were operating normally, then what they would do is, if they think that this is an outrage, that these ACA credits are expiring, then run on it. Tell that to voters all across the country. Make that your message in the midterms, and you will win back the House of Representatives in 2026 if you think it's that powerful of a message. What we can't get into the situation of doing is we've now reached this point where a government shutdown comes when there's just any kind of policy disagreement, right? And it doesn't work that way. Like, I get that Democrats don't like some of the changes, for example, that Republicans made to Medicaid in one big, beautiful bill. You can change those after the next election. That's what an election means. The Republicans won Congress. They have the White House. They get to do some things Democrats may not like. You don't shut down the government in response. You can fight it, you can argue against it, and you take it to the voters in the midterms.
So what do you believe, in your opinion, is the political fallout if this thing continues to roll on this shutdown? Because we are 1 week away from the longest shutdown in American history. If this continues on well into November, what are your thoughts? I mean, will there be one political party that's more vulnerable than the other?
Well, if you looked at polling at the outset, so right when the shutdown started, it did look like voters were actually blaming the White House and Republicans more. The recent polling, it's starting to even out more, and this is what you've seen in past shutdowns, that the public reaches a point where they just in effect say, I blame all of you. It's a pox on all your houses. And nobody comes out the other side looking better for this. And that's the thing, is we've looked at this closely. If you go back to previous shutdowns, it's an exercise in hostage taking, and the hostage takers don't ever really get what they want. It's like they make a bunch of noise. Eventually, they just kind of slink away, and the shutdown goes away. And unfortunately, that's probably what will happen here. The thing that should force them to the table, you mentioned the expiration of SNAP benefits. Let me give you a couple other things that people will probably care about. The people who are in charge of keeping oversight of America's nuclear weapons and nuclear stockpiles, the agency that runs that, about half of them are furloughed. That seems like something that's going to be a problem over time. If you think about USDA with food inspections, so here's something that changed there. If there's a foodborne illness outbreak at a chicken plant, the USDA will still get a call and they'll send in inspectors. But what they've pulled back on is what they call active surveillance, which means they're out there doing surprise inspections, making sure everything is okay. They're not doing that. So what if we have a big salmonella outbreak here in a couple of weeks and it gets traced back to that shutdown? People are going to be really mad, and they should be. So this is only going to get worse over time, and we need some cooler heads to prevail. I will say this.
Oh, go ahead.
One thing we haven't talked about, I understand people's frustration. We share it. We think the shutdown's a terrible idea. But you are now seeing some Republicans, Josh Hawley and a couple others, saying, you know what, this has gone on long enough. In the Senate, let's get rid of the filibuster. If they do that, they can just reopen the government on their own with just 51 votes. They don't need Democrats. And I get why that's appealing. But that is about the worst thing that Congress could do right now, because I know no one cares about the filibuster. It's a annoyance to the party in power always. But what the filibuster is it's this one procedural tool that forces the Senate to get to 60 votes on most things. Not everything, most things. If that goes away, that is the last procedural safeguard that forces the parties to try to work together. When that goes away, what you can expect is anytime one party has a full majority of the House, Senate, and the White House, they will come in and they will absolutely jam everything they want down the other side's throat. And then a couple years later, if the other party comes in, they'll get in, they'll reverse it, and jam through all the things they want. Think about what that means from the perspective of our country. If every 2 years or 4 years, we are completely rewriting our tax system or redoing our healthcare or immigration system, depending on the whims of just one party. That's a disaster. And so I really hope Republican senators will hold the line on that and hang in there and protect the filibuster.
So let's turn it back to the military. You mentioned the nuclear watchdogs that are there that are furloughed, and I'd imagine there's also some other areas of the military that not so much the enlisted soldier who is going into combat, but you also in your notes you had talked about at the service academies the furloughing of professors there, and I'd imagine that would increase class sizes and therefore less learning. What's your opinion? Because it sounds like the impact of this shutdown this isn't going to be fixed overnight, even if the government opens up. I mean, this is going to have a residual effect. But what are your thoughts?
Well, we talked already about some of the things in terms of military readiness. The fact that we have fewer people looking over our nuclear stockpile. We're not putting out bids for new weapons contracts. Here's a couple other things. National Guard drills canceled.
Wow.
Navy shipbuilders furloughed or working without pay. 2/3 of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency furloughed. So all of these things, if you've even been casually watching the news, you've read about, gee, America has a really big shipbuilding problem. We can't build ships here anymore. We're really vulnerable to cyber attacks. You just heard what I said there. All the things that we desperately need from a military readiness perspective, we are jeopardizing all of that. And I want to come back to the service members themselves. What happened was they faced their first pay period about a week into the shutdown. The White House managed to do this thing, which was in effect, they found some money in the couch cushions at the Pentagon. And they said, look, we found enough funds to pay the service members. You might have read a couple days ago, there was a report that when their pay period comes up at the end of this month, that there's a donor, a wealthy donor, who gave $130 million to tide over service members. I don't know if that'll stand up, if they'll be able to do that, but you can see these are all triage maneuvers. And what it does is, even if these service members ultimately do get paid, I mean, just think about the stress that they face. And let me share with you, this is direct from service members themselves. This is what they say about their own finances. 80% of them say they're paying more than they can afford on housing. 76% of them carry debt, but almost half of them say they have difficulty making ends meet. Quarter of them say they struggle to afford food. One of the things that's pretty unique to military families is almost half of them are single earner families. And you can understand why that happens. Every 2.5 years or thereabouts, a service member is getting moved around the country. Well, it's pretty hard for your spouse to just get completely settled in a new place and go find some job. So a lot of these service members, you mentioned earlier, an early career enlisted man or woman, maybe they're making $30,000 a year. So do the math on that. You're making $30,000 a year. Your wife or husband may not be working. So a single missed paycheck, or even the thought of it, that's the difference between, am I getting groceries or am I paying my credit card bill? And the fact that there should be an outrage about this, because whatever it is you think is worth fighting for, in terms of a shutdown, it's not worth jeopardizing our military readiness or really insulting these service members that we say all the time what heroes they are and everything else. And that's all true. But is this how they deserve to be treated?
So what's your opinion on that, on the $130 million? Let's say that does actually happen. and that covers the next 2, 3, whatever pay periods. Doesn't that open up? It almost seems like a slippery slope because now you are inviting private money coming in to fund government agencies, government entities. Now
Yes.
you might get into a role where the transportation department can get Ford to actually sponsor them, and or you might have SpaceX come in or something. There's just doesn't it, and it can also create a conflict of interest. I mean, but what are your thoughts?
Yes, it's terrible precedent, but it's part of a much bigger problem, which is this, which is across so many areas, Congress is completely abdicating its job. And this is true now. This has been true for some time. But when you look at tariffs, like in the Constitution, it gives Congress the power to levy tariffs. Now, what Congress did is over the course of several decades, they've kind of just voluntarily given up that power to the president. Where it's even more clear cut is on appropriations. Who spends and who tax? That is Congress. And one of the things the White House is increasingly doing is they're doing all these workarounds where they're finding these buckets of money in different agencies to fund things while the government is shut down. In some cases, they're not even spending money that's appropriated. Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse. It's their most fundamental responsibility. And I think one of the things that's happening is to the extent that people out there are concerned that we have too much power coming together in the White House. And again, this didn't happen overnight. You can go back to the Bush administration, Obama, like there's been lots of instances where slowly the presidency seems to be getting more and more power. It's because Congress is doing less and less. So the less Congress does, the more it creates a vacuum and the more it creates an opening for either the executive branch or the judicial branch to step in and do something about it.
So the hundreds of billions that are coming in from these tariffs, that money has yet to be deployed, though, amongst government agents or U.S. government agencies, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the money that's coming in from tariffs, there seems to be an intimation from some people, like in the White House and or around it, that this is kind of like a, slush fund that we can kind of allocate however we want. It doesn't work like that. Tariffs are just another form of taxation. They go to the same place, the U.S. Treasury, that our income tax and our corporate taxes go to, and they should be treated like that.
Okay. So then therefore that money's just sitting almost like it's sitting in escrow though, because now our new budget, I mean, it has yet to be resolved. So therefore that money can't be deployed yet. I mean, where I'm going with this is that because of the shutdown, you have to wonder there's a pile of money over there in Treasury right now
Yeah.
that hasn't been utilized. But the question I have for you is, can it be utilized in this emergency capacity?
So I don't know the answer to that, the
Okay.
mechanics of it. I know where it's supposed to go amid the shutdown. Is this tariff money just piling up and it's there to kind of be used for the White House if they like? I don't know the mechanics of how that should work. I do know how it's supposed to work, and it just couldn't be clearer. And look, this gets back to I think No Labels, which is so focused on trying to find a way for Congress to work together, is bipartisanship gets a really bad name these days. People either think it's impossible, like it's crazy to think it's something you can do, but in the absence of it, this is what you get. So that's why we have a shutdown to keep the government open. The Senate needed 60 votes because we fortunately still have the filibuster. That
Mhm.
means you need Democrats to vote to help keep it open. So the absence of bipartisanship is why we are in another shutdown today.
So if a candidate wanted to run, they wouldn't run on a no labels ticket though, right? I mean that would be an independent
So yeah,
candidate,
No Labels is not a party.
right?
We're an advocacy group. We have some congressional allies in the House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans who really closely align with us. But the biggest thing we do is inside Washington is just try to create forums for these members to work with one another, to talk to one another. I think one of the things that would shock people outside of Washington is as bad as you think it is in terms of the way the relationships work in Washington, it's worse. So, I mean, we talk to these members and they'll tell us that when they come in for their first week of orientation, it's literally red bus, blue bus, Republican events, Democratic events. So from the moment they set foot in Washington, they are encouraged to believe you're not on Team America, you're on Team Red, or you're on Team Blue. And then once they get going, a lot of these members, maybe they're there for 3 days a week. I mean, years ago, the members would live there, their families would know each other. And when your families know each other, if I know your spouse or your kids, it's a little harder for me to go on MSNBC or Fox News and say, that Todd guy's the Antichrist, right?
Yeah.
But when you don't know them, you can just demonize them. And so that's what No Labels has been so valuable in doing is we get these members into rooms, we get them talking, they get to know each other. And for all the dysfunction that there's been these last couple of years, to the extent that there's been some big achievements like that infrastructure bill that passed in 2021,
Yeah.
that was our people all in the middle of that, trying to get it over the finish line. And they did.
There are some infrastructure grants that have been pulled. I know in the state of Maryland, there's $185 million that has been pulled in
Mm.
infrastructure improvements there. And part of that money was to rebuild the Key Bridge that everyone knows there was the terrible accident, the bridge collapsed. So with those grants though, can we expect that when the government does reopen, that those grants will still be funded?
They should. So they were appropriated by Congress. Now, a lot of them, you noted, the Key Bridge funding has been put on pause. Up here in New York, there's a huge project called the Gateway Tunnel to build a new tunnel under the Hudson River, which is desperately needed. That's on hold, which, you know, seems like purely designed to stick it to Charles Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, who are the
Right.
Democratic leaders and obviously represent New York. But yeah, this is just going to get worse by the day. That's part of why No Labels is out there making the case for this, because we're mindful that for a lot of Americans, this shutdown is still a little bit at a distance. Like it may not, for most people, still be affecting their day-to-day lives. But I'll give you one more. The way a shutdown works is you get two classifications of workers. There are essential workers. That means they have to come to work, but they do not get paid. With the exception of, I mentioned, there's these military workarounds, but they don't get paid during the shutdown. They're supposed to get back pay. Then you have workers who are furloughed. They get sent home. They don't work at all. They will still also get back pay. So here's two things that are happening. One is we have sent over 1 million federal employees home to not work, and they're still going to get paid. So, like, think about the budget impact of that. How smart do we think it is to pay people not to work? But here's the other thing. Those essential workers who have to come to work but are not getting paid, they're going to start to tap out. So wait what happens if this goes on for another 3 weeks, and then you'll get air traffic controllers and TSA agents at the airport who are saying, hey, you know what? I know I'm supposed to come to work, but I haven't got a paycheck in 6 weeks. So guess what? I'm staying home sick. So once you then have those lines at the airport, and people can't get to where they need to go for the holidays, like there's all these pressure points, and we've talked about a lot of them. There's military pay, there's food safety, there's food stamps, there's our airports, that over time, it's going to be impossible for us to avoid the consequences of this. And it's not going to be a kind of distant thing for many people. They're going to feel it and they're going to get pissed and they're going to call their member of Congress. And they should be doing that right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have one final question for you. It does go back to the military and the National Guard. Obviously, that has been a hot button topic in the country with the National Guard going into American cities to help try to hopefully reduce the crime rates that are impacting some of these inner cities, the larger cities. We haven't heard a lot about this now because it's not that crime is dropping, but the National Guard, I assume, is because of this government shutdown, they are unable to go into these cities, or am I being misled?
I don't know that that's another one I don't know the details of.
Okay, because I'll give you I'll editorialize for you. I would think that the White House cannot send a National Guard into, say, Chicago, and Governor Pritzker isn't going to say anything about it because he can't talk, because then his crime rates will be thrown in his face. So it's kind of like everybody's just kind of trying to keep that quiet, but that is a subject that you don't hear a lot about now. But I would imagine if we have some drastic crime rates coming up over the next few weeks, it will come back as a headline story. So, Ryan, how can the audience reach No Labels?
NoLabels.org. You can go there. You can sign up. One of the things I think you'll find out if you go to No Labels and that we really work hard on, we have a category on our website. It's just called The Latest, where we are putting out a lot of facts and information that we just don't think people are getting anywhere else. Like you'd think, well, gee, that's what the news media is supposed to do. But increasingly, they don't. And people really wonder if am I getting the real facts about what's happening, or am I getting some narrative with some facts backfilled to back up the narrative? And so that's how we got to you. We did a primer on this military readiness and service member pay issue to help people understand this is what's really happening. We've done something very similar on the healthcare issue to help people understand what is the fight really about, what are the facts around it. So NoLabels.org, people can sign up, become a member, figure out ways to get involved, and hopefully start to exert some more pressure on our leaders to come together and be bipartisan, starting with reopening this government.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And you're right. The data points that No Labels gives are exceptional. I know that we are drafting an article that will be distributed on our sites about the very subject that we're talking about today. And I know we're utilizing some of those statistics. So that's great. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today. I definitely would love to have you back. Hopefully the government shutdown we will be reopening the government, and then we could talk about the residual effects of it.
We can hope. Thank you, Todd.
Absolutely. So, on behalf of Ryan Clancy, I am Todd Schoenberger. Thank you once again for joining us on Power Hour. Coming up next on Friday on the Money Path is Barbara Duran. She is the president and CEO of BD8 Capital Partners. She's going to break down the post-Fed analysis. So, until then, take care. All right. That was great, Ryan. That was great. I hope that was okay.